Hi, I'm doing a cook with me video today, and it's for Thanksgiving or any holiday, and this is day one of cooking and baking. Every time I do something like this, it's a 2-day event. I cook some things in advance and then I cook the day of, but we're starting the evening before. Typically I make 5 to 6 things, and one of those things is a dessert and the others are like sides, appetizers, and entree. And I almost always do the dessert the night before, so that's what I'm doing today. I'm making a chocolate pecan pie since I think that's very Thanksgiving. So I'm going to make that tonight and kind of just like film along with me as I make it, and some other prep things, and I'll also film tomorrow the day of. So I'm starting to make the filling, which is with coconut sugar, which is a little chunky, but I think it'll be okay. And I'm not making this up. I'm using existing recipes that I found online for everything that I'm making, just because I do like to make up recipes, but not for dinner events like this. I like to have the recipe already made so I don't have to think as much, especially for something difficult like pecan pie, which is very egg heavy. It's difficult to make a vegan version of a pecan pie. I'm going to use maple syrup. And I have a pre-made pie crust. I'm not making the crust from scratch, just to make it easier. It says to bring it to a boil. Okay, I'd say it's boiling now. It said to keep it at a simmer for 2 to 3 minutes. Turn the heat off and move it to a different burner so it can cool down. And while it's cooling down, half a cup of non-dairy milk. I'm gonna put in the description the link to all of these recipes. Ground flaxseed and 1 tablespoon of tapioca flour. 1.5 teaspoons of vanilla extract. So 1, 2, 3. And salt. I'm going to use a fork to stir this together because the tapioca flour is a thickener and it's a little bit difficult to get to break up. It's a lot like cornstarch. I imagine cornstarch would maybe work as a substitute in this recipe, but I happen to have tapioca flour. So you can see the little clumps. You have to make sure to break those up. So I'm going to take this, add it to the maple syrup mixture, and that'll help cool it down as well, and that's really going to make this thicken up. And then add pecans, which is 2 cups. These are already chopped up. And that is that filling mixture. Now I just have to wait to get it cool enough to be able to add chocolate before adding it into the pie crust. I just put this in the fridge to help it cool down faster. You could wait room temperature, but I just wanted to be able to put the chocolate in, which is 2 ounces. You could use a bar here, but just dark chocolate, I'd say 70% or above would be good. You just don't want it to melt immediately. It's going to melt somewhat when you put it in the oven, of course, but stir it around with the rest of the mixture and bake for 40 minutes. It still looks very liquidy, obviously, like boiling, but this is the type of pie that you need to let set in the fridge overnight, and being in the fridge overnight will help it firm up so it will not be this liquidy tomorrow. I'm also going to start the stuffing, since you want the bread to dry out and be a little bit crunchy. So I'm just going to take the 2 loaves of bread that I have and cut them up into cubes. Okay, it's the second day and I'm gonna pick up with the stuffing. The bread dried out overnight. I just set out those 2 trays of bread, and I'm making 2 different things of stuffing, 2 pans. So I'm doubling the recipe. Each requires an onion, a whole onion. At least that's what the recipe calls for. But these onions are massive, so I'm just going to use half an onion for each stuffing recipe. Each of the stuffings requires 4 stalks of celery. So this is also something you could probably do the night before, just chopping up things. I go down them lengthwise a couple of times to get a good size. Okay, the next thing to chop is garlic, 5 to 6 cloves for each pan of stuffing. This is going to be a lot of chopping. This whole day is a lot of chopping, which is why sometimes I start this the night before, but I didn't do that this time around. More chopping. This is for a casserole that I'm making. It's a tater tot casserole called Tots Giving Casserole. calls for 2 cups of chopped onion and 1 cup of chopped celery. So more chopping of the same thing. And it calls for chopped garlic, 3 cloves. So I am going to chop all of this up and put it in its own bowl. So I think that's all of the chopping I have to do for the stuffing and the casserole, except for herbs, dried rosemary, thyme, and sage. So this is the onion, celery, and garlic for the Thanksgiving casserole, and that's done. So now I'm going to do more chopping for the cauliflower roast, which is a whole roasted cauliflower in a skillet, and around the edges is chopped carrots. And the recipe also said a mixture of chopped carrots and chopped potatoes, but I decided to just do carrots only because we already have potatoes in mashed potatoes and in the Thanksgiving casserole, since tater tots are potatoes. So these are going to be a little bit larger size pieces, and I'm going to do around 2 to 3 cups. I'm not peeling these carrots. I'm sure you could if you wanted to. And these should have no problem. The size of these cooking, since they'll be cooking at 425, I believe. I'm chopping up shallots now for a gravy. Not a standalone gravy, but for the cauliflower roast, you have to make this thick gravy-like sauce to drench over the cauliflower. So that requires shallot and garlic. So I'm going to mince these up. For the cauliflower roasted sauce, I have the shallot and garlic minced up quite finely. You don't want this sauce to be chunky. Like with a regular gravy it would be fine, but you want this to really infuse in the cauliflower. I also have fresh thyme and fresh rosemary, about a teaspoon of each of those, and 4 tablespoons of vegan butter. So I'm finally going to begin cooking something on the stove top. And also, in preparation for other things, I have a big pot here with water, which eventually will be filled with potatoes to mash. The tater tot casserole and the cauliflower roast are going to go in the oven at the same time because they're cooking at the same temperature. The stuffing needs to go in the oven first because it's cooking at a much lower temperature. That's melted. So I'm going to go in with the shallot and garlic. Cook that for a couple of minutes, and then I'll add the thyme and rosemary along with celery salt and nutmeg, and then cook for another couple minutes. The shallot and garlic are in a good spot, so I'm going to do a teaspoon each of nutmeg and celery salt, and add the thyme and rosemary. And cook this for maybe 2-3 minutes. Next, to make more of this sauce and thicken it up, I'm going to take a tablespoon of cornstarch and add it to a 1/4 cup of vegetable stock and kind of stir that up as a thickener. Add that in. Then I have 1/2 cup of maple syrup. And a whole cup of soy sauce. And the last is 2/3 of a cup of tahini. And this is going to drench a whole head of cauliflower. 2 tablespoons of Worcestershire sauce. Cook this until it starts to bubble a little bit, not a full-blown boil, but a little bit of a bubble, and then continue cooking for 10 minutes, and it should get nice and thick and a good pourable consistency for the cauliflower. So I'm gonna let this gravy sit over here for a while and switch to the stuffing. So just some oil in a pot and the chopped up onion, celery, and garlic from earlier. Cook this for about 5 minutes. Then I'm going to add 2 cups of vegetable stock. So I'll combine the vegetable broth mixture with the dried out bread cubes and some fresh thyme and rosemary, and then cover it and put it in the oven, and that's the rest for the stuffing. Oh yeah, also we peeled up a bunch of potatoes and chopped them and just added them to this massive pot of water, which is very, very full. So we'll have to get that boiling shortly so that we can mash them. Good. Covering up the stuffing, and then I'm going to do all of what I just did a second time and then put both of the pans in at the same time. So now that the stuffing is in the oven, the next thing I'm going to work on is the Tater Tot Casserole, which I'm just using this exact same pot because the flavors are the same, so why waste time with another pot? And I'm going to start with a little bit of oil and 4 vegan sausages. These are the field roast apple sage sausage. You technically could use other vegan sausages, but these are the most like Thanksgiving flavor, I think. Cook these until they're lightly browned. The vegan sausage is browned a little bit, so I take that out of the pot and add in the garlic, onion, and celery. Cook this for about 3 minutes. Then I'm going to add in the fresh thyme and rosemary and cook for 3 more minutes. I happen to have beef flavored vegan stock cubes. The recipe says beef, but if you don't have beef, non-beef vegan flavored ones, you can just use vegetable ones and that'll be fine too. It just gives it like a deeper flavor, along with half a teaspoon of black pepper, which I'm going to eyeball, 2 teaspoons of Dijon, 2 tablespoons of vegan Worcestershire, mix that all together, and also 2 cups of frozen mixed vegetables, like a corn, carrot, green bean type of mix. 1 cup. Mix this all together, cook for a couple of minutes, and then I'm going to add back in the sausage along with a couple other things, including flour, to help thicken it up. 1/4 cup of flour. I'm going to just put in a little bit, stir it around. A little bit more to get the full 1/4 cup. And then I'll add in the non-dairy milk, and at the very end, a diced up green apple, and that will be the filling that will go in the casserole dish. Adding in the diced apple, which is peeled, by the way. I don't think you have to peel it, just whatever your preference is. Take it off the heat and add it to the dish. And now I'm going to take my frozen tater tots. I just bought a bag of tater tots, and I'm going to arrange them all on the top. You could probably just put a layer of these on in any, you could just throw them all on as long as it's one singular layer, but I think it looks nicer when you have rows like this. And both the Tater Tot Casserole and the Cauliflower Roast, which I'm going to do next, go in the oven at 425. I have my whole cauliflower. I cut off all of the green leaves and like the excess stalk so it can sit in the middle of the skillet like that. But first I want to put it upside down to pour some of the gravy in the bottom so it can kind of travel through all of those little roads within the center of the cauliflower. It's going to be really hard to get it all the way through to the middle, but I think this is probably the best option. Flip it the other way and pour. I'm going to use this brush to evenly spread it over. It's going to start falling onto the rest of the skillet, and this is much like a regular turkey. You kind of have to check back on it a bunch of times and go back and pick up all of the gravy drippings with the turkey baster again and suck them up and place them back on the cauliflower. Cauliflower is coated in a layer. I'm going to put this in the oven along with the Tater Tot Casserole. The Tater Tot Casserole is going to stay in there until it's done cooking, which is about 50 minutes. For the cauliflower, I'm going to put it in for about 25 minutes, and then I'm going to repeat the process with the gravy. Give it another coating, another layer with more gravy. Use the turkey baster to pick up any drippings that is collecting in the bottom of the skillet, to coat it again, and then about halfway through the total cook time, add in my chopped up carrots to around the edges of the skillet. So this is everything. We have the casserole, the pie, both of the stuffings, the mashed potatoes, and the cauliflower with carrots roast. And I hope you enjoyed cooking with me for this Thanksgiving meal, and thanks for watching.